Good morning, everybody. It is just before 9 o'clock or 9 o'clock on the dot. I think it's important for us to start the meeting promptly. And as we go, may I request if honourable members, and certainly I have if I can request of the committee if we can all be on video, if it's possible. This way we can all see each other. It'd be a really helpful situation, because as a committee that is meeting for the first time virtually, sometimes these things become a little bit tricky to get to know members. But I'm hoping that the next meeting will be in person. So if I can request members to be on video, if that's possible, I would truly appreciate that. Is that okay?
Agreed, Chair. Good morning.
Good morning. No, great to see everybody. If I can, we'll open the meeting as the videos go on, and thank all the members for being here. And Tatele Khanya now ding mo kopano. I wanted to also ask, I know Umamu Unontenjo, Honorable Molwell, her surname has changed, if I recall, in the previous meeting, but I don't want to speak on her behalf. I will allow her to make her input right here so that we can correct it in the list of the members who are on the standing committee. Is Honorable, I think it was Mazibuko you said. Is she here? Oh, you are on mute, me. I'm struggling to hear you.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Am I
now
audible?
I can hear you, yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. My apologies. Good morning to you, Chair, and good morning to the honorable members present on the platform. Yes, as I have indicated in our first meeting, that my surname has changed and all the necessary documents have been submitted to Parliament. So in other areas, the surname has indeed changed. So I am Noneba Galega Mazibuko, no longer Mulwele. So I'm no longer using Mulwele.
No, that's appreciated, and that's why I want to ask Darren and the Secretariat if we could change that on the list as the agendas are sent out and all of that. That'd be really helpful. With that, let me welcome everybody and thank you. Can I ask everybody just to mute? There's, I think it's the National Treasury there that's still on.
Apologies, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody, and welcome all to the respective members of this very important standing committee. I would like to, first of all, thank you for making time and do appreciate that you've taken the adjustment as we went from we were potentially going to meet yesterday and now being able to meet today. I want to make just some requests that you'll notice. We will look at the agenda in a moment, and hopefully that will be adopted by the committee. But just a couple of notes I wanted to make as we go. That just some key points I wanted to make is that I want to request, just as a culture and practice, obviously as members are present in the committee, we want to try and start promptly on time and stick to meeting times and ensure that we can finish, given my previous remarks about the fact that many members serve on multiple committees. And so I want to make sure that we can accommodate as best as we can in this particular busy season as we go. Secondly, in this regard, naturally, there was, we have tabled for noting, I don't think it'll be a function for discussion for today, the legacy report from the previous terms work, from the previous committee's terms work. One of the key recommendations that came from there, and I think it's a sensible one, just a recommendation for members to also be able to serve on alternates in other committees, particularly the ones that are within the finance cluster. So that would be a request made to political parties if we can achieve that and be able to, so that we can have cross-cutting knowledge sharing, particularly in this portfolio committee. I do want to note, given that today we have our first meeting with Treasury, that we establish a practice upon which at least documents can be received, certainly by the portfolio committee, 3 days ahead of the meeting, and then we can do our best to circulate them. I want to re-emphasize that particular point, requesting our honorable members is a request from the portfolio committee that we can ensure that members have got sufficient time to go through documentation. I know Honorable Douglas would agree with me vehemently on that particular point, and so if I can request, particularly for Treasury, and I'll certainly, when we look at the draft agenda, I've already requested through the committee for the other presentations that will be coming to be circulated timeously so that members have got enough time to do. We are going to have a busy couple of weeks, and certainly we want to ensure that in going forward in the next while, as we go through documentation, prepare, I want to ensure that as a committee we find time to not only meet in person, but I'll task the secretariat, and we can discuss it as a committee, to have our own strategic session where we can lay out, taking matters from our legacy report, to set out our own strategic objectives for the term for the 7th administration. And so in due course, we'll figure out maybe a day where we can spend some time together as a committee to be able to set out all of those things so that we know where we go. Fellow members, with those remarks, sorry, there's an echo somewhere here.
Go to screen and make sure you have the...
Yeah. So having dispensed with all of those welcomes, I don't know if any members have we got any apologies in the meeting that we need to note, if there are any members who are not here? I will then safely assume that everybody is Honorable Douglas.
Good day, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'm just giving an apology for Honourable Des van Rooyen. He's also on this committee with me. He will be joining this committee a little bit later.
Okay, no, noted. Are there any other apologies as we go? I don't see any other hands.
Good morning, Chairperson, honourable members and guests. Mr. Leganyane indicated that he is going to have to leave the meeting earlier due to another engagement. That's it, Chairperson.
Noted. Thank you so much, Darren. I appreciate that. With those apologies dispensed with this, I think we must move on to, perhaps we've spoken today that the fundamental purpose behind the meeting is to go through the briefing by National Treasury. And then if I can request that the tabling of the legacy report be noted by members. It is not for discussion today. I wanted to ask that perhaps if members have been furnished with the document, and if we can table it and for members to just note it. Is that acceptable to all members in the committee? If you can give a thumbs up or something. Honorable Burke, when I'm looking at you here on the screen, all I see is a stern face. Perhaps maybe a thumbs up will also be helpful.
Chairperson, I used to be accused at school of frowning at the teachers, which I always considered an honor to them because it means I'm concentrating on what they say. So I'm happy.
I will take that as a compliment, Honorable Sir. It's great to see Honorable Sarapin. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It's good to see you. As former colleagues and also members serving in the executive, I think it's fantastic to be working together here in this. So I'm very cautious never to be selective of members when we welcome them. So I don't want to be discriminatory in any way. With that dispense, are we comfortable with the budget? Let us then hand over then to National Treasury. They will take us through the presentation. Honorable members, just in terms, if we can agree on timelines, the presentation isn't long. I want to give Treasury the appropriate time, and I also want us to give us enough time for us to be able to engage on some of the issues that are put forward. So perhaps maybe because this is our first meeting, if the presenter from National Treasury, if you can introduce the team that you are there with, and then naturally then move with the agenda as we go from there, that would be most welcome. And then towards after that, we'll talk about the committee's draft program, which is next up on the agenda. So if I can hand over to National Treasury, if you can do some introductions, and then perhaps take us through the presentation. Thank you very much. Sorry, I could hear Treasury earlier on. Now it looks like they've either run out of data or money or airtime or all of the above.
All of the above, Honorable Chairperson.
Let me hand over to you if you can do the intros and then you can proceed. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much for the time. I'm with me is the Director General of National Treasury, Dr. Duncan Peterson. Next to him is the acting DDG. As you'll recall, one of our DDGs has been appointed Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank. And for that reason, her place now is advertised as an acting DDG, Dr. Randall. He's acting DDG Public Finance. On the other side, we've got its name is different. She's DDG, Intergovernmental Relations. Again, the DDG there has retired end of the month. End of the month, and then there's Kobisa next to me. She's in public finance as well. Let me just some preliminary remarks before the DG speaks. Let me just say this issue of documents not being on time, it may be an anomaly for this committee, Chairperson. Because ordinarily, we table the budget in February, and with all the necessary documentation, and we meet the following day and go through all of these things. What has happened, which is something which we've done, but unfortunately the election caught up with us. And the elections caught up with us, and that necessarily the legislation had to be revived with the new committee, with the new parliament. So we have to start afresh, but in an environment when time is not with us. The Public Finance Management Act requires us to conclude this piece of legislation by the 31st of July, 4 months after the beginning of the financial year. That's a requirement. But I'm saying to you, Chairperson, it's a normally, ordinarily, we've got sufficient time from February to July to interact with the Act. I want to appeal to honorable members to understand the constraints which have been imposed by the elections on our ability to process the things on time. Understandably so for honorable members who are new in the committee. They may then say, no, we don't have time, we don't have sufficient information. Correctly so, because the amount of time and information which we provided between February and end of May has been. I mean, most of the committee members here, and if I recall, even from all the political parties, I can't remember. All of you in my group, I knew, and I also welcome. I pledge to work with you, all of you, as I've done in the past. But the tradition has been, an honored member, not necessary for the minister and the DM to be available all time. No, ordinarily, we would have this kind of interaction and allow the officials to proceed. And in that spirit, and I agree with you, it's going to be important for some of the people to familiar with the other committees. I know Honorable Khanyana is already on the Finance Committee. I don't know whether the ANC thinks that he's the only person who can count. So, but he's already on the Finance Committee, which is also a good exposure for both committees. Thank you. I'll hand over to the DG to take us through to some of the highlights and the DGs who are going to make the necessary presentation. The good thing about this team, Dr. Rondera, largely in public finance would be more the national government bias, and Okhale, she's heading intergovernmental relations, would be more provincial and local government bias. So we bring that set of skills in order to provide a balanced report to the committee. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Over to you, DG.
Thank you, Minister. Good morning, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members.
Honourable Chair, I apologize. I don't want to disrupt you. Either my internet is terrible or not great. I had not recognized the Minister being here. Welcome, Minister. Thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it. Sorry, I had not seen you there. It's dark in the room that you are there. So my sincere apologies. But I thank you in the spirit of the notes that you have made on behalf of the committee in terms of how we operate together. I truly appreciate that. So I just had not noted you there. So I didn't want you to say, Nangu, you are welcoming other people who didn't welcome me. It's not how I like to operate. So I appreciate the Chairperson. And I apologize. You can proceed, Honorable Member.
Seems like it's you who doesn't have data now, Chair.
I'm not earning as much, so I appreciate. Perhaps maybe I'll get some sponsorship. If there's an appropriation for data, I will appreciate that.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and good morning, Honourable Members. My name is Duncan Peterson. I'm the DG of the Treasury. Let me also, Chair, congratulate you on your election as Chair of SCOA. And of course, all the members of SCOA as well. We look forward to working closely with you in this new administration to ensure that we can deal with the budget matters in particular to the best of our ability, and that we are able to provide you with the necessary support. Let me also, Chair, before we start the presentation, the Minister's already introduced the colleagues that are here. Let me also just offer to you, Chair, and to the committee, if at any point in time you would like us to, outside of our regular business, of, for example, presenting the appropriation bill, if you'd like us outside of our regular business to come and see the committee and explain any other aspects of our work, our modeling and forecasting processes, the tax processes, how the budget process runs, our debt management activities and funding strategy, and the work around intergovernmental relations, please feel free, Honourable Chair, to reach out to us, and we'll make sure that we make the team available to render that service. I think it's very important for us to be available to you for any questions that you might have. Chair, from my side, I'm going to make just a few opening remarks before I hand over to Rendani to take us through the rest of the presentation. And the start of those opening remarks is just about talking about the significance and the importance of the appropriation bill, because we always are reminded that funds can only be spent by government if it's been appropriated through a money bill and an act of parliament. And so the money bill becomes very important because it's the authorizing legislation that allows for drawdowns from the National Revenue Fund to occur to ensure that we can meet the requirements of the state in a particular financial year. It therefore allows us to execute the budget in a particular year, and it allows for continuity and uninterrupted rendering of the various mandatory and other non-discretionary services of government. And this, of course, includes things like social security, health and education, but also the debt service cost that we have to pay due to the budget balance. And that debt service cost, as the honourable members will know, is a direct charge on the revenue fund. The appropriation bill itself also holds important constitutional significance because it safeguards the rights and progressive recognition of rights that are in the Constitution. And those are very important to us because of how it helps us to affirm the democratic values of dignity, equality, and freedom. And of course, the appropriation bill also helps us to ensure that we remain one of the most transparent budget processes, and that we run one of the most transparent budget processes in the world. As the honourable members will know, we are regularly recognized for running one of the most transparent budget processes in the world. Just to note some technical details, Honourable Chair, before I hand over. Before the annual budget is passed, departments are allowed to incur some expenditure. There are explicit provisions in Section 29 of the PFMA that allows expenditure to continue in the absence of an approved budget. And if a budget is not passed, funds can be withdrawn for expenditure to take place as direct charges against the revenue fund until the budget is passed, until the appropriation bill is enacted into law. But there are some caveats to that. Funds may only be withdrawn for services for which those funds were appropriated in the previous annual budget. And there are certain other technical limits which are articulated there. I won't go through it, which governs how that spending might take place. There are also additional limitations around the fact that spending that takes place before the budget is fully enacted through the passing of the appropriation bill may only be for services for which funds were appropriated in the previous annual budget or adjustments budget, and we cannot introduce any new spending priorities beyond that that was there in the previous year until the appropriation bill is passed. While it does allow for continuity in spending, it doesn't adjust for inflation. The other minor technical point to make, Honourable Chair, which confronts all of us as accounting officers in government, is that until the appropriation bill is enacted into law, no violence can take place. And so it's important to note that limitation remains there until the Appropriation Act is passed. Chair, with those few introductory words, may I now, with your permission, hand over to Rendani to take us through the remainder of the presentation, after which we'll then hand back to you. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thanks, DG, and thanks, Minister, and good morning, honourable members. In addition to the colleagues, Chair, that you see here, we also have colleagues from public finance on the platform and colleagues from IGR and colleagues from the budget office. I'll be the one to take you through the presentation like the DG indicated. What brings us here is a budget which was tabled by the Minister of Finance on the 21st of February of this year. An appropriation bill was tabled together with accompanying documents. Section 213 of the Constitution provides that money may be withdrawn from the National Revenue Fund only in terms of an Appropriation Act of Parliament. So an Appropriation Act does the legal authority to spend the money, or as a direct charge against the fund. And we also have Section 26 of the PFMA that provides that Parliament must appropriate money for each financial year for the requirement of the state. The key word there is that money is only for 1 year or one financial year. Although the budget is compiled within the MTF framework, the other 2 years are just estimates, but the appropriation is only for 1 year. In addition to the Constitution and the Public Finance Management Act, we've got the Money Bills and Related Matters Act that provides that the minister must table the annual budget as set out in Section 27 of the Public Finance Management Act in the National Assembly at the same time as the appropriation bill. So, Chair and honorable members, what this slide shows is it shows three things. One is the fiscal framework. Two is the division of revenue bill. And lastly is the appropriation bill. Let me start with the fiscal framework. When the budget is tabled, the committees of finance, they start with the consideration of the fiscal framework and the revenue proposals. So we have ticked that box of the fiscal framework. That gets considered within 16 days or as soon as reasonably possible after tabling of the budget. After the fiscal framework is a consideration of the division of revenue bill, which must be passed within 35 days after the adoption of the fiscal framework by Parliament, or as soon as reasonably possible thereafter. So we've ticked the first two boxes, which is the fiscal framework and the division of revenue bill, which is now the Division of Revenue Act. Now we've got the appropriation bill. Parliament must pass the appropriation bill with or without amendments within 4 months after the start of the financial year, meaning that it must be passed before the end of July. So expenditure before the promulgation of the bill. So what happens between April, the beginning of the financial year, and when the bill gets passed, and the legislated period there is end July. So this is the provisions of the act that the DG touched on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, just to focus on Section 29 that has got a formula guiding departments on how funds can be spent before the appropriation bill is passed. Next slide, please. Okay. So the structure of the appropriation bill, in the appropriation bill, we've got Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. Schedule 1, we've got votes there. Funds appropriated by main division and the Appropriation Act, and the by main division and the economic classification. Sorry. So just to add that accompanying the appropriation bill is the estimate of national expenditure. I will talk more about it when I get to the section of the allocations of the votes. So the spending of appropriation invested in subsection 1 is subject to the appropriation bill, the Public Finance Management Act, and the Division of Revenue Act for the financial year. So the DG has already indicated that at the moment we are hamstrung because the appropriation bill is not yet passed. So there are certain provisions of the PFMA that cannot be invoked given that the appropriation bill itself is not yet passed. So in the appropriation bill, we have got what we call government components. So these are specialized delivery units. It's an organizational form administered by the Department of Public Service and Administration. So also in that schedule, we've got, I think there are 4 at the moment, the government components. And even their allocations are indicated in terms of the main divisions and economic classification. Main division stroke budget programs. We use those terms interchangeably. So an amount set out in Schedule 2 of the bill must be spent according to the purpose specified in that schedule. So the provisions of the PFMA that are applicable to departments, they are also applicable to the government components. So they can overspend like departments does. I think we have inserted this provision mainly because in the past there were some technical challenges, especially with the departments within vote. So the head of the government component that receives the transfer and subsidy is accountable for any unauthorized expenditure referred to in subsection 6 of the appropriation bill. Next slide, please. So section 4 of the bill talks to the conditions for appropriations. So the Minister of Finance in writing may impose conditions, including but not limited to earmarking on an amount in Schedule 1 or 2. Schedule 1 being the votes, 2 being the government components to the Act or the bill, other than a conditional allocation in order to promote transparency and accountability and the effective management of the appropriation. So in the Act, there are those funds that are exclusively earmarked. It means that it is only Parliament that has got powers to amend. And there are those funds that are simply earmarked, and the National Treasury has got the powers to amend upon receiving application by the departments. So the Minister of Finance in writing may also stop the use of an amount in respect of which conditions imposed in terms of paragraph A are not met. In addition, the Minister, the Minister in writing may, on application by an accounting officer, amend or, in exceptional circumstances, withdraw a condition imposed, including an earmarking in terms of subsection 1A. So the stoppage of an amount in terms of subsection 1B must be disclosed in the National Treasury quarterly report to the relevant parliamentary committees. So in this case, especially that were the biggest customers of the committee, on a quarterly basis, we prepare what we call SCOA reports. Those are the expenditure reports that we submit to the committee. In there, we'll also disclose some of these provisions that compels us to report to the committee. So this will be included in those reports. So now section 5, it talks to the use of unspent funds. The language that we'll hear most of the time is virements or shifting of the funds. Most of those will be included. Some of them will be disclosed in these SCOA reports that I've referred to, but the adjustment budget also includes in detail the shifting of funds through virements. So section 5, the Minister can approve the use of unspent funds for transfer, subsidies, and payment for financial assets within the same main division through budget program. Sorry. In the case of payment for capital assets, the Minister can approve the use of the unspent funds within the vote, unlike the first one, where it is within the same main division. The sum of unspent funds in main division approved for use in another division cannot exceed 8% of the amount appropriated under the division unless approved by the Minister of Finance. So if that virement request or shifting of funds is above 8%, the Minister of Finance must approve that. The approval of unspent funds used must be disclosed in the National Treasury quarterly report to parliamentary committees. This is the issue that I spoke about when I referred to the SCOA reports. Compensation for employees within a vote in Schedule 1 or 2 can only be increased with the minister's approval. Next slide, please. So we've got section 6 in the appropriation bill that talks to authorization of expenditure. Despite any provision in any other legislation to the contrary, the minister may approve expenditure that cannot reasonably be delayed, and such expenditure is unforeseeable and unavoidable. The act of God type of expenditure, or is of an exceptional nature, which, if not approved, is likely to cause serious prejudice to the public interest, or was announced during the tabling of the 2024 annual budget or adjustment budget. So in the budget speech, there are certain programs or projects already announced, things like deployment of the military in the foreign missions, DRC and Mozambique. And I think the speech also makes reference to G20. It was approved in the appropriation for 2023-24 financial year and must be proposed to be rolled over to the 24-25 financial year in order to finalize expenditure that could not take place in the 23-24 financial year as originally planned. This talks to the rollover, which will be covered in detail when the adjustment budget gets tabled. So the total amount of expenditure approved in terms of subsection 1, so that the bullets referred above, may not exceed the total amount for contingencies. In the contingency reserve, we've got for the current financial year, we've got 5 billion. So meaning that that expenditure shouldn't exceed the 5 billion budgeted for. So if the minister announced an amount for a specific item during the tabling of the annual budget, an adjustment budget or expenditure approved in terms of subsection 1 may not exceed that amount. So expenditure approved in terms of subsection 1, that's the top part, is a direct charge against the National Revenue Fund and must be attributed to a vote, is subject to conditions that the minister may impose. I've presented a provision that talks to the conditions to those appropriations, must be disclosed in the National Treasury next quarterly report to the parliamentary committees. So I made reference to a SCOA report. I'm sorry for that, Chair. Must, despite Section 32 of the Public Finance Management Act, be included in an appropriation bill within 20 days of the minister approving the expenditure in terms of subsection 1. Next slide, please. Spending before the commencement of Appropriation Act for 25-26 financial year. This is just providing for some transitional arrangement between the current financial year and the next financial year. I'm not going to spend the whole time on it. It's that the transitional arrangement that provides for spending before the appropriation bill is passed for the next financial year. Next slide, please. Section 8, in short, it talks of delegation and authorization. The Minister of Finance may delegate to an employee of the National Treasury any power conferred on the minister in terms of this act, except in Section 9. Authorize an employee of the National Treasury to perform any duty imposed on the minister in terms of this act. A delegation must be in writing, is subject to any limitation or condition that the minister may impose, may authorize the employee contemplated in subsection 1 to subdelegate in writing the delegated powers or authority to another suitable employee of the National Treasury. And again, does not divert the minister of the responsibility concerning the exercise of the delegated powers or the performance of the authorized duty. So some of the provisions are delegated to the DDG Public Finance in the National Treasury. Next slide, please. Yes. The appropriation bill has got 41 votes that outlines the amounts allocated per vote. So we've got vote 1 until vote 41. So the estimate of national expenditure, the ENE, it unpacks in detail the total allocations allocated to all the votes. In terms of economic classification, and again, it also provides non-financial information, measurable objectives, outputs, indicators, etc. So, in addition, the Schedule 2 ones that I spoke about, the government components, appears as a transfer on some of the votes, like we've got 4. I'll give an example. One of the government components is the Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services. It appears as a transfer on the vote correctional services. We also have GTEC, Government Technical Advisory Center, which is under the National Treasury. It's a government component as well. It will show as a transfer. But in the appropriation bill, that's I think page 40 of the appropriation bill, that's where you will see those government components. Next slide, please. The next slide is just a continuation of the votes that we have, and the details are captured in the appropriation bill and again in the estimate of national expenditure. The national estimate of national expenditure provides for those allocations in detail. Next slide, please. This is simply it shows a split of the appropriated funds in terms of the economic classification. The light red there is transfers and subsidies, transfers to public entities, etc., including the grants, take 73%, followed by current payments, 25.5%, under current payments of goods and services, and compensation of employees. So that's in short, in terms of the breakdown of the budget, in terms of economic classification. For each budget, for each vote, you are able to also see this split. It is also in the appropriation bill and also in the estimate of national expenditure. Next slide, please. So in the appropriation, we also have the provisional allocations. These are allocations, these are provisional allocations which will be confirmed after meeting certain requirements. The details of this provisional allocation will be finalized either during 2024 adjustment budget or the 2025 budget, and thereafter allocated to specific votes. In addition, I've already indicated that we've got a 5 billion, which is in the contingency reserve, but not allocated in advance. It is to accommodate unforeseen and unavoidable, the act of God type of expenditure. Next slide, please. So this concludes my presentation, and thanks very much, Honorable Chairperson and members.
Thank you, Rendani. Honorable Chair, that's the presentation from our side. We now hand it back to you. Thank you, Chair.
Let me thank the department for the presentation, and obviously note that there are multiple supplementary documentation that I think the committee will have to make inputs in relation to. So with that being said, I think the process going forward, I will allow members to take questions and to place questions, and also if we can combine it, if you have input to make that is specific, if you can also do it at the same time. But I would like to request that at the risk of suppressing anyone's right for input, to ensure that they are brief and we speak to the presentation. For just because it's a very tricky situation to chair on Zoom, may I ask that if you indicate by using the famous emojis that sit on there so that I can see you. Certain members are not on camera, so if you just use the raise hand feature there, and I recognize Honorable Kingsley there. I must apologize if I don't address you appropriately. So it's just that it's everyone's names, like mine is Musi on the thing. It's not. It's just how the setting is. Honorable Douglas is there. I thought I saw another hand there. I recognize Honorable Member, sorry, it is Sorry, if I can, let me just get the full list of the committee members, because that will be helpful for recognition. It's Honorable Neil May. Am I corrected? Yeah, that's perfect, Honorable Neil May. Can I get... Let me just, as I'm working through this list that sits there in the other hands, can I, in the meantime, I'll communicate in the if I haven't recognized you, if you can just keep your hand raised, and then I'll certainly get back to you. But let's start with those first three. Honorable Wesley, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My questions are related to Section 5, use of unspent funds. When it comes to the environments that have been made recently in 2023, 2024, I know it's going to be in the SCOA report, but is there a way that we can start having sights on what those environments have been over the last few years? How many approvals has been made by the minister? And then did it come in under that 8%? So I would like to know if we can get details on that. Not just a high-level perspective, but quite a drill down on the number that have been done of approvals and the percentages. Then on Section 6, how many act of God, exceptional nature incidents, like there's the DRC Mozambique and G20 thing, how many of those have actually happened in the last year? Obviously, the way I look at it as a member of the official opposition, the way I see it is I want to see if there's been any fiscal dumping, any front loading between last year and this year. Everybody knowing that the election was coming in 2024, was there a huge amount of anomalies under both the environments under Section 5 and Section 6? Then on Section 7, very similarly, we're looking at transitional arrangements between spending before and the next financial year. How much of that has happened? What was the numbers? And between last year and this year? Those are my three questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The question is taken. Can I move over then to Honorable Neil May, and then I'll come back to Honorable Kingsley? I recognize that.
Good morning, Chair and honourable members, and to the National Treasury and Minister. No, thank you very much. My question is, out of the allocation made to each of the 41 budget votes, is the National Treasury aware how much will go towards the payment of contingency liabilities, such as medical legal claims in the health sector? Because when I looked at the money there, it was less than most of the other transfers. And that is the biggest challenge that one has in the health sector, is that their budgets are going to the medical legal claims. And is there not another method in which that could be separated, maybe to the state attorney's office, because the health sector is suffering in that way? This is an important question with regards to, because contingency liabilities tend to absorb departments' budgets before they even spend on critical service delivery areas as per their respective mandates. Chair, the other question that I have is, according to the 2024 budget review, 60% budget allocation goes to social wage, which includes health, education, social development, community services. Whilst this is commendable, however, how does this tie up with the indiscriminate budget cuts that affect even key social spending areas such as education, infrastructure grants, national health insurance grants, and EPWP? That to me is very important, because the EPWP is what is at the moment assisting in service delivery and job creation. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Kingsley, and I apologize, I noted, I'll note Honourable Van Rooyen, but there is a member who is obviously his device is Samsung. So I'm very cautious to recognize Honourable Samsung. But I don't assume that's a member of the committee, but if you could please indicate, and then we'll move on to that one. So Honourable Kingsley.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning to Honourable Minister and Deputy Minister. First and foremost, thank you to National Treasury for the presentation. I think it was well succinct and to the point. I got a number of questions, if I may start. I'm audible, Chair. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm audible.
Yes, you are. I can hear you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, reference to the previous speaker submission, the 60% social budget, has the National Treasury at any time started looking at a possible trajectory? Where will we be landing at 2029? I am concerned of that figure. I would like to know if any proper advance trajectory has been made and what are they going to do to deal with that. Then just a short question around the National Development Plan. The question is it still relevant? How often do we actually review the National Development Plan given our current situation that we are faced with? Then just a matter that I would like to also ask is around the National Health Insurance. The cost in the outer years, have a projection been done, and what funding plan will be utilized? And is there a funding plan at all, and what is the approach that will be taken? Then as far as the contingent liability is concerned, my concern lies around the reduction of that out into 2029. Is there a plan for that? My bigger concern lies around the social spend versus growing the economy. And let me use one example. The EPWP program, how relevant is it still in a real impact and having real impact on real lives as far as the people that are doing them? From what I gather is that they live from hand to mouth with no real value into the future. And I'm very concerned about that. Chair, I think I'm going to leave it at that. There is a few others, but I'll give the other people opportunity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Honourable Van Rooyen, and then I'll move to the Honourable Member who's using the Samsung device.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I hope I'm audible. But also let me take the opportunity to pass my greetings to Team National Treasury under the leadership of both the Minister and the Deputy Minister of the so-called Government of National Unity. I'm saying a so-called because we've got a different view of what is Government of National Unity as those who are mandated by the people to represent Umkhondo Wesizwe Party. But that's not the subject for today's meeting, but I thought I should just clarify why I call you a product of the so-called Government of National Unity. We are holding a different view. We are not a Government of National Unity, but something else. The introduction of the appropriation bills to the 7th administration, it has been an unusual and unprecedented introduction, leading to a situation whereby public representatives in the form of members of parliament are not given adequate time to process what goes into the bill, a detailed bill of this magnitude. And of course, having adverse effect on our responsibility to hold the executive accountable. So what I'm trying to drive across here, Chairperson, is the fact that we didn't have enough time to do justice to this particular bill. And I think the presenter from National Treasury also acknowledged that there was a delay. My specific question, Chair, having accepted that we have to work under pressure to process this important piece of legislation. My specific question, Chair, is Has National Treasury done an analysis of what caused the delay? And what are the lessons learned from the course? And what are the recommendations that we should take forward as a country? So as we avoid, in future, we avoid recurrence. I think that's my only question, Chair. And we hope, of course, as MP Party to under this pressure, we hope that we will use the little time that is provided to us to interrogate the details of this bill in the various departments where allocations are made. Thank you very much.
And then if you can indicate, Honorable Member, in the Samsung. Oh, it's I noted, sir.
No, thank you so much, Chairperson. I had tried to rename my gadget unsuccessfully. I think it will not happen in the next meeting. Greetings to you and the members of the committee. Let me also extend greetings to the Minister, the DG, and the senior management of the department. I think that the Minister made an important note here, Chair, that because of the time pressures that we had having to do elections and the unavailability of most political parties during the election period and the time delays that we had having to constitute a government, inevitably was going to have an impact on the operations of the Parliament, the National Assembly in particular. Let me hasten here and say that, or pose the following questions. And it's a point that the Honorable Neil May has alluded to here that, despite the huge social wage bill that we have as government, we are always accused of driving a neoliberal agenda in terms of, especially in terms of budget allocations or the manner in which we do appropriations we propose appropriations as the National Treasury. But on the converse, Minister, we are also being accused of presenting a welfarist budget. So it's like a double-edged sword. On one side, you are accused of presenting a budget that is led in neoliberal perspectives. And on the other hand, we are accused of presenting a budget that is welfarist in nature. And I think we need to explain that, Minister. It's very, very critical that we have an understanding of how we can explain this budget to our people and to all sectors in society. And I think that having studied the global and the domestic fiscal environment, you can best, together with your officials here, help to unpack such contending perspectives. And I have seen that there has also been an additional allocation on the NSFAS. I think it has moved from 48 billion last year to something like 59 or 69. I have not received the documents on time. So I wanted to check. You might have noticed that we have had very, very serious difficulties with the allocation of NSFAS funds or the distribution of NSFAS funds to students, and the developments that we ended up seeing with the board having to be dissolved and certain actions having to be taken against against responsible officials. So with this additional allocations, have we put mechanisms in place, or is there a way in which, as the National Treasury, will make sure that there is a proper accountability on the NSFAS funds? I'm saying this, Minister, because when we were at the induction workshop, the Public Service Commission had said that there are certain early warning signs that were detected before by them, and they were reported to government. And such early warning signs were not heeded to. And I'm afraid that if we do not have a proper way of managing the NSFAS allocations, we may go back to what we had previously, where there was uprisings in our universities. And we must avoid that. We can't have uprisings in our universities when we have money that must be allocated to students, and maybe through our bureaucratic processes, such monies do not end up reaching the intended recipients. I just felt that it's something that we need to look at. It's a very, very serious matter which can plunge the country. And if you may not be ready to respond to it now, maybe you may need to meet with higher education. Honorable Chairperson, we can still say they can come back to the next meeting and present on how such a management is going to happen. Thank you so much.
And then the last recognized hand is that of Honorable Hlonyane. If I can hand over to you. I thank you so much, Ntate Lekganyane. And let me just see if there are any other. I don't think there are any other hands. I'm going to hand over to Ntate Hlonyane, and then we'll then be able to allow for Treasury to respond.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I am a woman after all, as you have said in Tate Hlonyane. But anyway, let me take this opportunity.
I withdraw unconditionally and apologize.
It's okay, Chairperson.
That's why I request videos to be on, Honorable Member. I apologize.
I don't look my best. Apologies for that. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Treasury for a wonderful presentation, as always. And then I would like to greet the Minister, the Deputy Minister, and all of you committee members. Chairperson, my questions actually, I just have two. I just want to get an understanding that on the presentation, they still presented agriculture and land reform as one, with the separation that have happened, that were done by the President. I just wanted to understand, Ukuri, is it possible maybe later on for them to show us, Ukuri, exactly agriculture is going to be given how much, and then the other department will be given how much? The second question that I have is that with the world being what it is today, I just want to know if we can have another situation where we are facing a COVID, for example. What is Treasury have put aside to make sure we can deal with such a global pandemic like the one that we have dealt with? Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you to honorable members for your questions. Perhaps maybe from my end, if I can just put a few so that you can respond collectively. Perhaps maybe to get an understanding, given that the National Development Plan as a document has been the guiding principle for at least the last term's administration, does that still remain the case going into the 7th administration? And noting the timelines indicated in the National Development Plan, whether those then become the guiding framework for the budget. So that's the first. The second is, obviously, when you look at, perhaps maybe this is more in comment between Tate Lekganyane's question about being a government that's running a welfare state. On another end, it's a neoliberal state. Perhaps maybe to understand what are some of the, given that our GDP growth has been adjusted downwards to 0.1%, what are some of the growth initiatives that Treasury anticipates being able to put forward as points that can go from there? And then perhaps noting some of the issues that are there. Perhaps there's a 5 billion rands contingency budget. Perhaps it might be good for this department to give us a sense of assurance whether that is enough to safeguard, maybe to the previous speaker's questions that speak to issues around geopolitical matters that are occurring, but furthermore, what is now typically described as acts of God, and I would assume COVID is that, although as a Christian myself, I'm not certain that it is an act of God per se, but we are not in a religious committee, we're in a treasury committee, so that is a debate for another day. Maybe my last question, maybe to Treasury, was to look at budget vote 3, and I know that perhaps maybe that may not be covered, it's on cooperative governance. I know there's been significant underspend and it comes to municipalities in certain areas. I mean, I think of one precise example in Nelson Mandela Bay where the minister had to intervene in limitation of certain disbursements thanks to the administration there. Whether there's a broader practice in this regard, how do we safeguard it over a long period of time? But also I do think that, and maybe this is more a question that we need to think through carefully, is that given take a city like Johannesburg, where post the advent of load shedding, post the advent of certain citizens being able to take themselves off the grid, the sustainability of Eskom's financial process in being able to meet its objectives. We know that this committee spent in the last administration dealing with bailouts for Eskom. How does that then, given that from a revenue enhancing processes in municipalities, the on sale of bulk services like electricity and water become such big aspects of that? So when we look at then allocations going into the next adjustment, whether there's a sustainability in the funding of local government as it goes, and I'm looking at the cooperative governance budget vote and looking at other aspects where municipalities themselves, some of them may not be fiscally sustainable. So these are some of my questions. Perhaps maybe Treasury can give us guidance from that. I know to new, fresh hands, I don't know if they are legacy hands or fresh. So maybe Honorable Lekganyane, Honorable Van Rooyen, and Honorable Hlongwane, if you can indicate whether these are new or fresh, or should I then proceed to handing over to Treasury to respond?
Chair, sorry. I just wanted to check, are we going to have a second round of questions or this is the last round?
Well, I think I'm very conscious of time, Honorable Van Rooyen, but if I can request, perhaps Treasury can respond, and perhaps maybe some of the questions that maybe follow-ups may be covered within that space. If not, we will allow a second round for sure.
Well, I'm grateful, Chair. Thank
you. There was another question, Honorable Lekganyane.
Chair, Honorable Chair.
Yes, sir.
No, I have lowered my hand.
Oh, have you lowered your hand?
It was a legacy hand, yeah.
I'm offering a free workshop on Zoom, Honorable Sir. So perhaps you and I can spend some time together doing a peer review. Is what it would be. Let me hand over to Treasury to respond.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start by reiterating what the DG said. Given that there are new members of the committee, at last new, maybe we're going to need a session where we at the request of the committee, again, we take the committee through how the budget process, what are the key issues, and so on, moving forward. Honorable Van Rooyen, I understand because there was an apology for him that is going to come late. And and he joined after I've explained the delays. Let me recap. With the appropriation, as Honorable Van Rooyen would know, we tabled the budget in February. We allow a lot of discussion, largely March, April, and adopted in May. Because of the elections, Parliament had to, there's a normal word they use. When Parliament closes, there's a nice English word they use. Parliament rises. Parliament rose earlier because of the elections before we could conclude the budget. So there was no delay in that sense because we tabled it in February. We never miss February. What then happened is that as a result of that, you recall last week, it was part of the legislation that was resurrected in Parliament because it was not concluded as a result of Parliament rising early than necessary. It was not a delay per se. One question has been asked about the medical in hospitals, in health departments, particularly the Eastern Cape. I can't remember the other one with medical legals. Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. We're facing a huge number of legal cases in those two provinces, which now run into billions. Ohale will probably come up with the exact numbers. It's a major risk for the budget process, particularly in those provinces. A key weakness there is in some of the inefficiencies. People can win cases because documentation has not been, we can't provide the necessary documentation. We need to help find a way of helping that. Is the NDP still alive? Or there was an NDP question related also versus health and education. Let me just say one of the key problems we have are policy choices which are being made. It's going to come back to the welfare state issue. I'm going to link that question. I call it policy question being made. We've got an environment where the economy has not been growing for almost over a decade. Your economy has not been growing on average at 0.8% over a decade. And the population has been growing at on average 1.41%, which means per capita as a nation, we're getting poorer. That in itself puts pressure on the fiscus that in the absence of unemployment, how do you deal with poverty? And therefore, the policy choices that have been made, I'm not justifying them in whatever way. The policy choices that have been made has been to say, look, we need to manage these poverty issues by putting more money on grants. The latest being the SRD, which on its own is massive, is about 40 billion. In that sense, it reinforces the welfare notion of the state. There's this Professor Philip Becker from Free State, who wrote the notion that South Africa, we can't claim the conundrum of the developmental state. We can't claim to be a developmental state because the key objective of a development state, we're not meeting that. The closest we can is he says we're not even a welfare state. The closest we can is to claim to be a welfare state. So we need really, I appreciate that the committee is grappling with this fundamental strategic question, which I hope these questions are not going to be raised. Part of the difficult chair, which you'll notice when you go into other committees, where there's understanding, where there's anything else, we get grilled. Even if it's correctional services that have underspent, the Correctional Service Committee calls us to explain why correctional services has underspent, instead of grilling correctional services. But I hope this debate, I heard these strategic questions we're posing will also be posing in the different committees. I'm going to be controversial on NAFSAS because part of the difficulty now we're confronting an issue of distribution. If you ask me, NAFSAS is an institution which is strange in my view. You create an institution to be a conduit between the universities and the Department of Higher Education, instead of transferring money straight to the Department of Higher Education and avoid all these unnecessary costs. So the issue in NAFSAS as we speak is not an underfunding question. We sit at about 59 billion this year. Yeah, this year we sit at about, so it's not an underfunding question. In fact, even when all other departments were not doing a major problem we've done a bailout over the years of state-owned enterprises. But what the effect of that has been to impact on service delivery on frontline departments. But NAFSAS never suffered this during that period. So, Honorable Khayan raises the issue of accountability. I would argue it's going to be important for those distributions because the accountability question rests with the line function department, because they are not saying we didn't get money. They got money, but there's a challenge about distribution. Somebody somewhere in the line function department must account for that. Have we presented agriculture and land reform as one department? Yes. For now, they are one vote. They are one vote. Moving forward, in the budget we're going to be tabling in February, we hope they would have been successfully separated in 2 separate votes. For now, when we tabled the budget in February, they were one vote. COVID preparedness, something like that, is an important discussion. In the G20s, there's one theme which is being debated, and that theme is pandemic preparedness. Pandemic preparedness. So the question is relevant. To what extent are we as South Africa dealing with that? And I think, in a sense, we're beginning to deal with that question. But if anything happens, for now, we have presented we still have the contingent reserve. Is it sufficient? It may not be sufficient. Let me just give you an example. When we're hit by the number of these disasters, we do have funds for disasters, but they were quickly exhausted. We had to draw from the contingent reserve. But we're building on that contingent reserve over the years. So, for instance, it's 5 billion now, it's going to be a different amount next year. We're beginning to build it in order to prepare for that eventuality. Is the NDP still a government program? The answer is yes. Of course, for the first time, the government of national unity will be meeting in the Lekotla next weekend. We will frame how do we approach these issues. We have had the growth initiatives, starting with the document produced by National Treasury in 2019, leading to the structural reforms now under Operation Vulindlela. The municipalities are interesting things, Honorable Chair. You've got the extremes. You've got a Nelson Mandela, which has got a surplus of 4.8 billion rand, which they can spend because they fight over who should get the tender. There's one issue there. But you have, on the one hand, 175 municipalities that have got unfunded budgets. So we work with all of those challenges as we deal with this. But as I conclude, Chair, you are raising a fundamental challenge which we're going to have. All municipalities that are basing their revenue on electricity, for instance. With the deregulation of that industry, but that means that source of revenue is going to disappear from municipalities. We need to think through how are we going to make sure that these municipalities are financially sustainable in the long term. So it's one of the challenges we're facing. My deputy, who's online, Deputy Sarapendo, says that he wants to dig and investigate that matter quite interestingly. So we're discussing it. I'm raising that issue to say we're discussing it. I don't know, DG, do you have any other additions? Tim?
Yeah, no, thanks, Minister. I think you've covered most of the questions. Actually, there were one or two technical questions about environments and section 16 approvals, which I'll ask Rendani to speak to. And then if there are other questions the colleagues want to come in on, they should just indicate to us. I just want to make one point from my side, Minister and Chairs, around the issue, Chair, which you mentioned on municipal debt relief. The committee members will know that shortly after the budget, we announced a program for municipalities who want to sign up to a program of improving their revenue, of installing prepaid meters, of improving the way in which they manage the electricity revenue, for them to sign up for a program by which their debt with Eskom will be relieved. And the way it was intended to work was that in the first year, we monitor the municipalities that are signed up, and then those who meet all the conditions would have 1/3 of their Eskom debt relieved in the first year, and then another third after the second year, and so on. For us, it was a mechanism to see how we can deal with the structural problems at a municipal level around revenue collection and the payment for electricity, but use it also to deal with the unsustainable debt that municipalities owe to Eskom. We had close to 80 municipalities that have signed up to the program, and at the start of the program, the debt owed by municipalities to Eskom was somewhere between 50 and 60 billion. That number has now risen, despite this program, to over 70 billion, which is the amount of money that municipalities owe to Eskom. And I think it's important, perhaps also for the committee, to reflect on this and for us to request the support of Parliament on this matter, because there's a big fiscal risk emerging in this area where municipalities are not collecting the electricity revenue due to them. They are not paying it on to Eskom, which undermines Eskom's ability to invest and its balance sheet, and then shows up as a fiscal risk down the line. So perhaps at a next opportunity, Chair, we can provide the committee with an update on this matter, so that we can see how we can work together to resolve it. I'll now hand over to Rendani to touch on some of the other questions, and then see with my colleagues if any of them want to come in. But I do think the Minister's covered most of it. Rendani?
Thanks, DG, and thanks, Minister. I will deal with the question by Honorable Speaker. I couldn't get his name, but it's Speaker number 1, the use of unspent funds. I think I need to highlight that we haven't effected any variance or shifting of funds on the basis that the appropriation bill is not yet passed, the one that we're talking about. So if it's not yet passed, we can't begin to effect any variance, including those variants that are provided for in the Treasury regulations or the PFMA, mainly because funds are not yet appropriated. That's point number 1. In the past, after the bill was being passed, yes, variants were effected, and in the adjustment publication for all the votes, there is a footnote where we indicate 1 and 2. I think 1 is approval by Parliament and 2 by the National Treasury. So all of that information is already out there in the publications especially in the A-E. On section 6, like I said, we haven't invoked that section because the bill is not yet passed. I think there was a question on NHI. I will ask my colleague, Mark, to talk a bit about NHI. I'll leave it at that at the moment. Mark, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and honourable members. If I can respond briefly on the NHI question and also one or two of the other health questions. So firstly, on the NHI itself, there are currently preparatory grants in the framework that you are approving for NHI. There's both an indirect grant for NHI and a direct grant for NHI. Those collectively amount to about $1 billion a year at the moment. It will take at least 2 years to list the NH fund as a public entity. And so one's not seeing the big funds for NHI coming in yet. So those will be something that you will need to consider perhaps next year or the year after, but they're not yet in this budget. There's just the preparatory funds. The NHI Act is not yet promulgated. The regulations are not yet out. So there's still a lot of preparatory work that is underway. On medical legal, honourable member, the budgeting for medical legal is done by the provinces at present. It's not under the votes of the national department, and that's why you can't see it in these numbers. Increasingly, we are requesting provinces to make appropriate provision in their budgets for medical legal claims, and there's also a process of reform of the medical legal arrangements, which would be quite good if this committee were to engage over time with the health and justice portfolios to look at how that space can be amended. On the pandemic preparations, they are to some extent funded through the transfers to the National Institute of Communicable Diseases. Currently, that body sits as a kind of sub-entity under the National Health Laboratory Service. Their size of their transfers is something we are trying to keep an eye on. But the mother body, the NHLS, is currently sitting on quite large accumulated surpluses. So we don't think they're under any threat at present. South Africa is also contributing to and is also applying to the pandemic fund and is working with the pandemic fund. So I think there is some ongoing work going in those arrangements. Given the time considerations, those are just some brief comments on those 3 health questions, including the NHI one. Chair, back to you.
Thanks, Mark. Chair, I see Edgar, the head of our budget office, wants to come in as well, if I'm not mistaken. There's no one else in the rooms. We've been covered. So Edgar, and then we can hand back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Good morning, Honourable Chair, Honourable Members. But just 2 questions on my side that were asked by Honourable Members. Firstly, there was a question, I think, by Honourable Douglas after he referred to the environments on the issue of the number in respect of emergencies. As Minister has already indicated, we do have a contingency reserve, but we do consider that particularly over the last few years, events have moved in a direction that suggests to us that it's probably not enough. But of course, in addition to the contingency reserve, it's important for the committee to note the fact that we do make provisions in the budget for disasters at both the provincial and municipal level, and these are allocated via the division of revenue. And the summary in this regard, I would refer honourable members to table 6.3 of the budget review, which was tabled in February and presented to the joint committees at the time after the tabling of that budget. With respect to 2023, which Honourable Douglas asked about as my interpretation was as a historical reflection on what happened last year. Out of the contingency reserve of 5 billion, 4.6 billion was withdrawn last year. A significant portion of that was for unforeseen and unavoidable events, natural disasters such as floods and so forth, as well as for rollovers and other smaller unforeseen events. However, as I said, in addition to the contingency reserve, we have disaster grants for both provinces and municipalities. So in 2023, Honorable Douglas, we had 150 million for provincial disasters and 2.3 billion for municipal disasters. Of course, it's difficult to have a discernible baseline for disasters, and I think for us the key thing is to treat the issue of contingencies as part of building fiscal buffers, which of course requires, among other things, for us to strengthen the overall fiscal framework, reduce the debt burden, and reduce the fiscal deficit, which makes it easier to make provision for contingencies. The last question I want to address is I'm not sure the names of the members have the same challenge as yourself, Honorable Chair. There was a question around budget cuts and whether they're indiscriminate or affect service delivery. I would refer honorable members in this regard to Chapter 5 of the budget review, which was tabled in the February budget, where we articulate the fact that, first of all, it is very, very difficult in a constrained fiscal environment to avoid a situation where there is an impact on service delivery budgets. And we are in a very constrained fiscal environment, as the minister indicated, both at the time of the budget and today. However, we have made an attempt to be targeted in our approach, and as a result of that, we have sought to maintain the social wage at 60%. And to the question of what it will look like over the years, we anticipate that it will remain at around 60% of the budget over the medium term, in line with our attempt to protect it. And in addition to that, we have also sought to avoid making any new reductions to infrastructure investments. So if you look at capital investments as articulated in Chapter 5 of the budget review, you will see that they still grow significantly above inflation because we have sought to avoid making any reductions in that area. So I just thought I'd touch on that to indicate that while it is extremely difficult and under the most extreme circumstances, all programs do get affected, we have sought to be more targeted and to avoid a significant impact on some services. Thank you.
Thank you, Edgar. Chair, back to you.
Thank you very much, DG. There are some new fresh hands that are occurring. If I can request of the members that we make it brief and succinct and speedily as possible. Of course, I did ask questions about growth funding initiatives emanating from the NDP and some of the other targets, and maybe to supplement the question even more, because I didn't think it was dealt with on the two big SOEs being Transnet and Eskom, and whether that funding model has been accounted for in order to ensure that we can have an extensive debate about the social wage component. I think it would be also important to note the minister's comments that say that GDP growth at 0.8% is insufficient, and therefore, however way we look at the use of that social wage is going to be important, that we have growth initiatives so that we can have job creating aspects to the way society is engaging with the budget. So I'd like to get perhaps maybe some of those on those 2 points, because I don't think they were covered earlier on. But let me recognize Honorable Kingsley, Honorable Wesley, Honorable Burke, and Umama Ulebohang, so that we can go quickly in those. So in that order, let me start with Honorable Udatu Kingsley.
Chair, I'm going to try to be very quick. Thank you very much. I was reasonably covered. The one matter, if the outer years are still looking at 60% social cover, my concern lies around the program of EPWP, and I would assume that when we go to Lekgotla that we can possibly engage on a matter of the sustainability of EPWP and the impact of that. And there wasn't a clear answer on that. If I can just get a clear indication, does National Treasury currently see the EPWP program as part of the social cover for our poorest of the poor, or are we looking at it as a growth opportunity? And I think that's the discussion that we need to engage on. I think I'm covered in that regard. And then just lastly, Chair, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the meeting so far. Thank you very much.
Honorable Douglas Wesley.
Good day. Thank you, Chair. Once again, thank you to the Minister and the Treasury Department and all the presenters. I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. I just want to follow up again on the issue of fiscal dumping. I think it's one of the issues that we didn't really raise as much of as I'd like to see. The reason is because I know of certain deals that were signed, whether it's by CEF or any other of the big departments that signed big deals, that were signed in the months leading up to the elections, once they felt that there was some possibility that they will not be in government again. So I want to have sight of those that were signed in haste. And I want to make sure that those big deals is told to us as the committee, and it comes under scrutiny by the Treasury. I also want to talk about debt and about our deficits. I heard a little bit about it, but I want to know which particular debt deals were signed with organizations like the IMF, World Bank, and other financial institutions, even in the BRICS environment. Which were the big financial loans that was taken in the last 12 months? I'd like to see a breakdown of that. And then I think that will cover me for now, just to give everybody else an opportunity. Thank you.
Honorable Mark Burke.
Thank you, Chair. I had the pleasure of meeting the DG and some of his team earlier this week in the Standing Committee on Finance, and I expressed to him that where Treasury continues to do the good work that it's developed a reputation for, they will enjoy our support. I want to perhaps start with using the Minister's example of NSFAS and agree with his assessment that the funding has increased, that the experience of students who are our country's future leaders has deteriorated. And so I want to perhaps use a relevant anecdote to pose my question, if you'll allow me half a minute. More than a decade ago, as a student on a scholarship, I always diligently made my rental payments, and Cape Town was experiencing overwhelming rain, much like we are this week, and the geyser dramatically collapsed through the ceiling. And I promptly informed my landlord, and he casually ignored me for more than 2 months. I spoke to my father, who was an attorney, and eventually decided to withhold rent, and the landlord resolved the issue in a matter of days. The point being that money talks. So my question is one of appetite, not of practicalities, although the Division of Revenue Act and the Public Finance Management Act dictates this. What is the appetite of the Executive and Treasury to delay or suspend payments in real time for entities that are not meeting their targets and that are actually developing a reputation like NSFAS is for misspending funds that has been allocated?
Thank you. I'd recognize Umama, if you can come next, if you can. Sorry, I'm struggling to hear you unless it's just me. So Can't hear you. Honorable Mudiba. Oh, it is the official from Treasury. Yeah, sorry. We are struggling to hear you. You are on mute, so perhaps maybe if I can, I'm going to suppress you in the meantime until Treasury then comes around to respond, and then if you wouldn't mind, you can supplement onto that point. I thought we were discussing as honorable members, so let me hand over to Honorable Van Rooyen.
Just two quick questions. In fact, the first one is more of a comment to clarify my earlier question. The issue on the delay, Minister, I think my question was misconstrued. And the explanation also seems to be assuming that members of the 7th administration understand what happened in the 6th administration. The record of the matter is that what happened in the 6th administration is completely new to the 7th administration, and I think that's the perception that should be carried through this particular process. So as we don't treat the 7th administration as a continuation of the 6th administration. We are a new administration. We went to elections, and a different product came out of that process. So the question of the delay was the consideration from National Treasury of the fact that here we are having new participants who were not there when other processes, due processes, as prescribed by legislations, were undertaken. So how do we accommodate that in our planning? It can't be business as usual as if it's just a normal continuation. And that's exactly my assertion. Hence the question, what are the lessons learned, by National Treasury, so as in future, we don't find ourselves having to subject public representative to undue pressure. And then secondly, maybe the question, we approach the elections with a limping fiscus. And then out of the election, then, of course, as I've indicated earlier on, came out something that we were not expecting, called the Government of National Unity, with a bloated and ballooned executive. What is the impact of this arrangement to the allocations that were meant for the key mandate of government? Development, as well as service delivery. And I know, Chairperson, in your previous life, you were very, very eloquent on this particular phenomena of a bloated executive. So I hope my question will be more understood by yourself, because if we don't do this analysis properly, I think we might miss the boat, because I think National Treasury, as the custodian of the fiscus, must come out clear and give a sound advice to the nation. So as also as politicians, because politicians, sat down after the elections together with their friends in business and decided on such an outcome. So it's important for National Treasury to take this opportunity and to advise on the impact of such decisions, because it seems as if no consideration was made by those who pursued this particular outcome, except settling political, undertakings. So what is the advice of National Treasury on this, but also what is its impact on the allocations? Thank you very much.
And I think even as we have conversations for the midterm adjustment budget, the question you raised about the size of cabinet and its impact on its on the broader budget allocations is going to be an important one. So let me allow Treasury to respond, and perhaps DG, if you can recognize Mele Bohang, and then she can be able to make input in that regard. I wasn't certain which aspect of the question she was responding to, so I don't want to interfere with your program, and then maybe some of the questions that have followed subsequently to that. I will close now the question sessions, and your response then will put the matter. There are some steps that we need to take, obviously, post facto this meeting, so I want to keep us honest with our time. DG?
Okay. Before DG, that person, let me deal just with the question. And this, DM Masond has joined us. I forgot to introduce him. He is part of us here. When we did the introduction, he was not here, so my apologies. Let me deal with the public works, extended public works program. Let me say, what does international literature tell us about extended public works program? Extended public works programs are part of what is called a comprehensive social security program. What are the elements of that comprehensive social security program? The first one is social insurance, which is things like NHI and others. The second one is social assistance, which is grants which we provide. The third element is active labor market interventions, which may include training, public works programs, and so on. Is it sustainable in this present form? It's something we need to debate. It's something we need to debate and say, if we're going to go as the Department of Social Security has done, Social Development has done, produced a comprehensive social security document, what are the implications for all of these pieces of things that we have together? And how do we make sure that we adjust them? So that's broadly where we're heading with the extended public works. Insofar as fiscal dumping, let me just say it takes a couple of forms. This one, honorable members, Honorable Douglas is referring to, it's something new, if I understand it correctly. Ordinarily, what happens when people talk about fiscal dumping, they talk about when departments, for instance, dump funds at the end of the financial year in subnational governments, so in provinces, in municipalities. What the honorable members seem to suggest is that the agreement signed by a number of government departments and a number of state institutions such as CF, I don't know. We don't have the full details of those agreements now. As the process unfolds, whether it was fiscal dumping or anything, maybe if they want us, we can dig that information, or via the relevant committee of mineral resources, that information should be asked. But if we're asked to go and dig it, we can. The last issue before I give to the DG is the bloated cabinet. Is a bloated cabinet. I would imagine the outcome of the elections suggests that we should be forming a government, whether it was going to be a government of whatever size, but it was a government which includes, because there was no outright winner. In that sense, we needed to bring all others. At a cabinet level, the difference is two. We had 30 cabinet ministers, today we've got 32. So the difference is two. Is that much? Of course, in DMs, a bit of a spicy there. We are looking at the implications of that in terms of, I don't think that's likely to have major impact on development and service delivery, because it's a couple of millions which may not, on their own, will not likely have an impact. Let me caution against an expectation that we may do something in the medium-term budget policy statement and adjustment. The adjustment process requires the Act give us only 7 conditions under which we can do an adjustment budget. all of those things, for them to meet the adjustment of budget, they'll have to meet that test, those 7 conditions, in terms of Section 30 of the Public Finance Management Act. Not everything qualifies to be included in the adjustment estimate. Is the debate also I've been having with some of my colleagues. We think that now we can do an amendment to the we can do adjustment. Adjustments are done in terms of the law, and there are only 7 conditions that have got to be met in order to qualify for the adjustment. I wanted to make those few points, Chair, and hand over to the DG.
Thank you, Minister. Chair, with your permission, we'll just now respond to a few of those outstanding questions. Let me check with Lebogang. She's in the public finance team. I think she wanted to add some perspectives on EPWP. Lebo, were you covered by the Minister, or is there any additions you'd like to make?
No, Lebo, the microphone is not working there.
Okay, good, Chair. So now to deal with the other questions, Chair and Honourable Chair, and to start with yours, around the growth initiatives. I think the point the Minister's made, and I think Edgar's made as well, which is the key challenge of the fiscal framework, and therefore has implications for how we think about appropriations, is, as the honourable members will know, for the last 10 years, the economy has grown in real terms at an average of around 1% per year. And if you combine that with a population that's growing at 1.4, 1.5% a year, it means that in real terms, your economy cannot sustain your spending ambitions. And so that means growth becomes a very important priority. We have articulated in the budget, Honourable Chair, that we consider there to be 3 fundamental pillars of a growth strategy. The first is a sound and stable macroeconomic framework with low inflation, because without stable finances and without a macro framework that is conducive to growth, it becomes very difficult to do business. The second element, Chair, of our growth strategy, which has taken some attention also of the Deputy Minister, is around the implementation of structural reforms, and in particular Operation Vulindlela and the coordination with the Presidency in this regard, so that we are able to deal with the very significant bottlenecks, in particular in energy and logistics, but also more broadly. And I'll touch on Transnet and Eskom in a shortly, Honourable Chair. And we are now shifting the work of that reform agenda, building on the successes in the first phase that has contributed to some of the changes we've seen in electricity, into a new phase of that structural reform agenda, which will start shortly. But we will also ensure that we finish the few outstanding reforms from the first phase, so that we can get growth higher. And then finally, Chair, the third pillar is around a capable and effective state, and a big component there is infrastructure. And there's a lot of work happening inside the National Treasury that we would like to present as part of the medium-term budget policy statement. Innovations around funding and financing for infrastructure, budget process reforms that are meant to crowd in more infrastructure investment, as well as mechanisms to bring the private sector more effectively into our infrastructure ambitions. Secondly, Honourable Chair, in terms of the questions around Eskom and Transnet and their interaction with the fiscal framework, as you know, we announced a total debt relief package for Eskom of 254 billion. We've reduced that from 254 to 250 billion, because one of the conditions that Eskom did not meet in order to qualify for the full debt relief package was the sale of the Eskom Finance Company, which they still have not concluded. And with the help of Parliament, we passed an Eskom debt relief amendment bill earlier this year, which allowed us to amend that amount and to strengthen the oversight mechanisms that we place on SOEs that receive bailouts from the fiscus. On Transnet, Honourable Chair, as the members would be aware, we provided a 47 billion rand guarantee to Transnet, so not a direct fiscal outlay, and we are working very closely with Transnet to ensure that they are able to meet their infrastructure needs through support from this guarantee and through broader reforms in the sector as articulated in the freight logistics roadmap. Finally, Chair, from my side, there was a question about the specific deals and debt agreements that have been struck. We raise, Chair and honourable members, the vast majority of our borrowing through our auctions. We have Treasury bill auctions in the order of about 14 billion rand per week that take place on Mondays. We have fixed rate bond auctions that take place every week as well on Wednesdays. And we've got inflation-linked bond auctions that take place. Those are the ways in which we raise the bulk of our, and then there are minor other auctions, floating rates and switches and so on. We also supplement our market funding with concessional loans from international agencies that are much more competitively priced, and we use that to bring down our cost of borrowing. In table 7.5 of the budget review, Honourable Chair, we list all of those loans that have been taken out with all of the relevant institutions, the New Development Bank, the African Development Bank, the World Bank, and so on and so forth. We indicate the disbursement date of those loans, the interest rate, and the committee members will see how concessional they are, the term, the grace period, and the amount. And we update that table every budget. And as soon as new loans are finalized, we announce them as well. So the honourable member can refer to table 7.5, and then if there are any other transactions we do during the course of this year, we will announce them and then update table 7.5 again at the time of the February budget.
Yes. Well, the Honourable Van Rooyen raised the issue of the new administration, which he says we've not taken into account. To our knowledge, we've always been ready to move and brief the committee. The unfortunate thing, Honourable Van Rooyen, the delay is not, I think the committee was set up 2 days ago. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, the committee was set up 2 days ago. There was no intention at all on our part to delay in presentation to this new administration. We make no assumptions. We've made it in the opening remarks that it is unfortunate that virtually every member of this committee is new, and we're making no assumption that members of this commission are familiar with what happened in the 6th administration across political parties. When I look at the members of the committee, to the extent that if that impression was created, we apologize for that. As I've indicated, the committee was set up 2 days ago. As soon as the chairperson, he can attest to that. As soon as he was elected and he conducted us, we are available to meet. Thank you.
No, I think if I can echo the sentiments that I expressed across, we met even not only the committee looking at the secretariat to deal with the truncation of the program, given the few delays that have occurred, both as a function of the cabinet announcement and the mirroring of portfolio committees, the establishment of the committees that then took place. Minister, you are correct in that we were convened on Wednesday. And then in the initial frame, we were meant to have been convened on Tuesday so that the Treasury presentation could have been on Thursday. But as soon as we made contact and the adjustment, I want to appreciate the team from Treasury were able to accommodate so that we can do it on Friday. And I can assure members in looking at the draft agenda that we're going to be fairly busy in the next week in being able to do so. It is not unique only to this particular committee. I can affirm that it's happening across all committees. I mean, even in the in other committees, there's been a truncating of the program and a catch-up. This particular one obviously has an urgency in that the appropriations bill is a bill as a law has to be passed, and so all of the issues that members are raising both emanate from the pressures created by law, the pressure created by the practice of simply convening Parliament, and then ultimately ensuring that we as a committee, once we've been convened, we can move from there. But I'm hoping that as we take the time in the next term, in preparation for the next, that we will be having sufficient time. In fact, I will request even from the Secretariat point of view to figure out some of the ways where we can do some of the catch-up work, because, Minister, the point is not lost on me that members who are new, especially from our perspective, it's about ensuring that we catch up so that we become, you can be assured of the oversight and the accountability that goes from there. And I want to thank Treasury for coming there. I don't think there are any more deliberations we can take on this particular point. Certainly, other than to say thank you to National Treasury, the Minister, the Deputy Minister, the respective, the Director General, and of course, I've got it that the DDG will be moving across. So we want to wish you well in that particular role and wish you strength. But certainly looking forward to engage. What the committee, I see in the chat's question, has requested are details that speak to contact points. We will avail that. I'll certainly arrange with the Secretariat to do that. And I know Honorable Berg's question about not geysers bursting, that wasn't your point, but the withholding of funding, I think, was covered within the NSFAS conversation. So, Honorable Berg, if you are sufficiently covered from that, I'll note the question if it wasn't covered, and then we'll take it on to the next briefing, if that's okay with you. Is that all right? Super. Honorable members, with that matter then dispose of, thank you so much to everybody. Let's move on to the next point in the agenda, which looks at our the consideration of the draft committee program. This was circulated to all the members yesterday. I want to perhaps maybe drawing on to, if you look at the respective dates that have been put forward to that, members, that has been put to you. I don't need to speak to it. The only point I want to emphasize is the point about...
Chair,
sorry?
Can I assume that at this point we're excused?
Yes, Treasury, please feel free. You can be excused. Ndiabulela, thank you so much, Minister.
Sir, thanks.
And thanks, please convey our thanks to the team. Yeah. As you would have seen the program that is before you now being put on the screen, I want to emphasize the critical points about the public hearings. Naturally, we would have wanted to, again, in the pressure of it being truncated and having to be so soon, the advertisements have been sent out, will be sent out today. Well, I wanted to request, with the permission of the committee, that we use multiple platforms to enhance public participation, of which one of them is about sending notifications to our respective stakeholders who have historically participated in the public hearing process. We also use our internal, our traditional points of communications, whether it's our website and certainly any other platform that we've historically used. I want to request that we use now also traditional or conventional media. And so I've requested our community communications officer that we issue a statement that we can hopefully be able to secure any interviews, perhaps maybe with a public broadcaster, so we can invite South Africans to participate on this. I think as a committee, we must dare never lose track of our responsibility as to the citizens of this country and their inputs going forward. So part of this work is required to do that. We have already some indications that people will be coming through. So those will be scheduled for next week, Friday. Having said that, we've obviously got a briefing next week with the FFC, and then hopefully a briefing with the Parliamentary Budget Office. Then there's, of course, the crucial on the 25th of July, having covered, we will on the 23rd of July, we have to meet to consider the adoption of the committee's draft report for the appropriations, and then obviously on the 25th itself, we will be debating this matter in the National Assembly. Having put that agenda before you, may I ask if there are any members who have any inputs, questions, or can we adopt this as the program for the next one? There are some hands that have gone, or one hand that has gone up, and perhaps if I can, Darren, I see your hand is up there. I don't know if you've got something to say. And then Honorable Neil May, and then Honorable Kingsley. So let me start with Darren. I saw your hand was up.
No, Chairperson, that's not my hand. That's not my hand.
Not your.
No, Chair.
You know, emojis all come in one color, so I must just check. You know,
it's Miss Bartlett's hand.
Oh, okay. I apologize. Let me then, in that case, Honorable Douglas.
Mr. Chair, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I just wanted to check on the additional dates that you had added in when we'll be doing things like the FFC and the parliamentary fiscal budget. Do we have times, dates for those presentations as yet? And then if those separate ones can also be updated to the program so that we know that we have a detailed program for presentations, for when the debate will be. The debate is fine. When will we find out the allocations of time and all those kind of things? So, but otherwise, I'm happy for us to go ahead with it as these come.
Honorable Douglas, if the presentation that is before you here on screen, I'm sure already indicates the date that the FFC will be on Tuesday, which is next week, the 16th of July, and then the PBO will be on the 17th at 9 a.m. And what I'm trying to also figure out, as much as virtual is convenient, I would like for at least we figure out ways where we can meet in person. This way, it will help certain aspects. So those dates are put before you there. They are not additional. They are the ones that were tabled in the draft agenda. Is that okay?
Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Kingsley. Kingsley, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Just a matter of logistics and practical, as I'm new to the committee, I just want to get an indication from you as Chair. These dates set out, you now sort of indicated some will be virtual, some will be in person. If we can get some clarity on that, and my request is further to that, if we do set up hybrid, that will be good. If we do have a physical meeting on a Tuesday, just from a logistic practical point of view, if it's possible to push out the time to 10 o'clock to give people a chance, if we do miss a flight on a Monday, to at least come in on a Tuesday early. That's just a practical arrangement I would like to just check with you. And maybe if we can indicate on a program which one will be virtual and which one will be physical, please, Chair. Thank you.
I'll certainly put that. I really would be keen, especially for the adoption of the committee's draft report, for that to be physical. Then that is still in enough lead time. The others we can because they are inherently presentations. I don't mind them being virtual. But if I can ask the committee, because given that we are new, not in Parliament or whatever, but we are new as a working committee, it is ideal that we interact in person, especially earlier on. This way we can create collegiality and a sense of team and working together. So I think that's going to be important. Honorable Bartlett.
Yes, no, Chair already covered me. Sorry for not switching my video on. I think you asked if we can accept the agenda or the report. So that's when I wanted to come in, but then the other honorable members already spoke, Chair. Just to accept this is.
Okay. So given those inputs, I don't see any other hands unless I have missed them.
Chair, sorry, it's me.
Oh, yes, sorry, Honorable Neil May.
Yes. No, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the session. It was very informative, and also being new to the committee, but luckily not new to finance. From a local government, I was a MMC for finance at some stage. What I'm saying is that I'd like to accept the program that we have here. I think the time aspect, you're quite right. If it's on a Tuesday, maybe we can have it starting 10, because obviously we fly, and with the climate change and the planes that are not landing, we might have an aspect on the Tuesday. But otherwise, I have no problems with virtual or physical. I would like at some stage maybe for us to meet ourselves even before a lot of the programs, just to get to know a little bit more of what is expected of us, and as a committee, just to get to know each other as well, so that going forward, we also seem to all be on the same page. I like your input. I heard you on radio the other day, it was on TV, and the vision, what it is that is expected of us. So I'm happy with what is before us. I'm happy with the what we need to do before the 25th of July. I must just check Scopa. I'm also on Scopa. I haven't received any of my programs yet, but otherwise, thank you very much, Chair.
Noted there. I think the only last hand is Honorable Mazibu. If I've got it wrong, or is Honorable no Yebo? That's fine. You are recognized, Honorable Member. Yeah, but you are not recognizing us. You have gone mute. Sorry, Honorable Member, your device has gone mute, so none of us can hear you, unless but I can't. Can I ask if the Honorable Member can type the input on the chat group? That might be easier. I find that sometimes when we can't hear one another, we can be able to put it on the chat group. With all the deliberations then been taken, I do note the point that members are making that says that if it is a physical, let us aim for 10 a.m. On a Tuesday specifically. I accept that members were flying in from various provinces and delays and all of that. That adjustment can be made. I will certainly discuss it with the Secretariat. I don't foresee it being a problem. But what I will then ask is certainly what we will do if the principle of the program is finalized. We will members have it. If there are any adjustments, we'll certainly communicate those timelessly so that members know. And then we'll add an additional column that confirms whether the session is virtual or in person, and noting the comments that are made by Honorable Neil May that it is going to be important for us for that point about collegiality, just to meet in person so that we get an understanding in a prior meeting about some of the responsibilities that are going forward. I thought in my opening remarks, I looked at some of the strategic objectives of the sixth administration, and I do think we have to meet together as a committee to take some time to be able to articulate a strategic planning session for the work of the committee, looking at what the seventh administration and what goals and targets we set for ourselves. I always say to one of the key points, and I think the members who are here would agree, that what we cannot do is inherit. And I think that was part of the point that Honorable Van Rooyen was making. You can't take the sixth administration's program, inherit it, and then simply say, let's continue business as usual. I certainly do think that as a committee, it is going to be crucial that we almost take the reality and cognizance of the current frame, plan for the seventh administration, and so that when we look at the legacy report of this particular committee, we can be able to say, well, we set ourselves objectives to doing this consistent with our legislative framework and its empowerment of this particular committee in what it can do. And we've been able to achieve that. We're not writing a legacy report looking forward. We must write a legacy report looking backwards and say, this is what we would want the 7th Administration Appropriations Committee legacy to be. So I think that workshop will be planned and certainly will form part of the earlier parts of the next, certainly in the beginning of the next term. I know that there's a chairperson's induction that has been scheduled, and I'd like for us to look at that. Let me move for an adoption of this particular item. Is there
Chair. Hi, Chair. Sorry, my apologies. I had to change to another gadget. That gadget couldn't give me. I'm sorry to speak after you have summarized, but I'm just making one request that as we prepare for the Tuesday briefing by FFC, if we could get the documentation on time. It would have been nice if the documents are available, the presentations, if we get them over the weekend, so that we can go through those presentations and familiarize ourselves, especially the members of the committee who are new in the committee. I agree with the workshop, and maybe we can make input as members as to which information do we think can assist us during the workshop. Maybe we can do those presentations if you allow that process as we prepare for the workshop. Thank you.
Certainly, you are. Feel free to, if we can make those submissions in writing so that we don't draft a program by committee. But if you can make those submissions, I'm happy for Ufuneka to receive those. And then once we compile it and plan it for the next term, we'll be able to make the submission in that regard. Having done that, can I ask for a move out for the adoption of the program?
I shall move for the adoption of the program, Mr. Chair. Honorable Wesley Douglas moves for the adoption of the program. Thank you.
I am assuming Honorable Neil May, you are raising your hand to second.
Honorable Bartlett.
Correct, Honorable Neil May. I am seconding the what Honorable Wesley has proposed. Thank you.
With that being said, I will note it. Let it be noted.
I'm also my name is Lakanya. I'm coming third after Honorable Wesley and Honorable May.
I'm
setting the proposal.
Fantastic. With that being done, I will assume that the program is also duly adopted, and so we will then work according to this. Just in terms of any other announcements, I'd already made one regarding communicating the public engagements. And so we will certainly have asked the communications officer with a draft statement just to announce those. Those will all be circulated, and they needed to be signed in the name of the chairperson, thus the delay. But they should be out in principle today, and then we will issue out that statement and hopefully to put out a broader public communication to ensure that we can engage the public in their submissions going into for next week, so that we are ready for that. I don't think there's any other announcements or correspondence. I don't know if the Secretariat, if there's something from your end that I need to be aware of.
No,
anything
from our side.
Okay, honorable members, with that being mine, let me thank you for a fruitful engagement. I think that as a committee, we'll certainly be putting a lot of work together. We've got to make sure as an appropriations committee, the legislative work that we've got, the ability to be able to hold accountability, but also given the legacy of the report, the law empowers us to do much more than just what perhaps maybe historically has been the case. And I think there's a massive opportunity for us to collaborate as parties and ensure that the 60 million South Africans are well served by the work of the Appropriations Committee. So without delaying much further, let me thank you for the spirited engagement And I look forward to seeing you next week. I would assume the first one naturally will be virtual, and so we'll see each other on the screens. And hopefully for those of us who are technologically challenged in any way, we can catch up and change names. I'm speaking to myself here. I'll adjust my name. I might call myself Comrade. No. I'll see how we go. But wish you all a fantastic weekend, and stay warm if you're in the Republic of Cape Town. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. J. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Have a blessed weekend, all people. Thank you, Chair.
Bye-bye, colleagues. Have a
Long
nice
live,
weekend.
long live the chairperson, long live honorable members.